When real men can't sleep, real men do the news. I tend to be ever vigilant because I have insomnia. I've had insomnia for years at this point, but it's been made somewhat worse just because we're working from home and my sleep schedule have just gotten mangled because we're working from home. But nevertheless, that means I could be here and I could be doing the news and I can give you guys whatever I am looking at that particular moment. Donald Trump tears into Joe Biden at one of Trump's press conferences. Now, Trump has been having these conferences like every day, and supposedly they're coronavirus briefings. Well, the catch here is the majority of the population thinks Trump is lying at those briefings and don't necessarily believe him. The public believes the CDC or Fauci by twice as much. I think Trump was getting like 30%. Biden was getting around 20% from the standpoint of trust, but Fauci was getting like 60 and CDC was higher. Meaning they trust the scientists, they trust the experts, they don't necessarily trust Trump. So despite the fact that he's having these briefings every day, it's unclear on the impact of those briefings. I'll tell you this much though. From the standpoint of whether or not it's more advantageous to be in front of the public having briefings, even if the public doesn't believe you, but to see you vigorous and engaged, as opposed to Biden, who's sitting at home in his PJs, vigorous and engaged is better. I mean, right now, Trump has a certain degree of agency. He can make a U-turn in regards to the policy tomorrow if he wanted to, in order to focus entirely and predominantly on getting elected by dealing with the material concerns of the population, basically moving to the left of Joe Biden. Trump, if you remember, when putting out the $1,200 idea, went to the left of the Democratic Party. Pelosi and Schumer was against that idea. So I hope you understand what I mean. Trump has agency in this process in order to make adjustments, in order to try to enhance his chances of winning the election. Biden, less so. Biden has a very specific path in order to shore up his chances of winning the nomination, but it doesn't necessarily seem like Biden is going to take that path. I watched Trump savage Joe Biden at the press conference. And I thought to myself, and it became that much more clear, Sanders disadvantaged Joe Biden in this race in two ways, two main ways that I want to discuss. And it's not typically the way that Democrats tell you, like Sanders ran against Hillary Clinton, and because he ran against Hillary Clinton, the very fact that he was in the race damaged her uniquely when she was going against Trump. Nonsense. Hillary Clinton damaged Hillary Clinton when she was running against Trump. That had nothing to do with Sanders. Fact of the matter is, it's bizarre as all hell to make the argument that it's somebody else's responsibility to get the candidate you voted for elected, as if it somehow absolves the candidate that they failed. Whatever the reason or whatever the logistics that caused them to fail, it is at the end of the day their responsibility that they failed. The vote, in that case, or getting voters, is supposed to be their responsibility. And if they can't build those contingents for either lack of trying, lack of effort, or being flawed in regards to previous policies or flawed in regards to character, that's a factor of them. Meaning it is nobody else's responsibility to get your candidate elected. It is up to the candidate to do that. Voter shaming is one of the most ridiculous, saddest, pathetic positions to take. My candidate is so weak that that candidate can't get elected without me browbeating and basically begging, well, begging is the wrong word for it, but basically browbeating and trying to cajole people into basically putting my guy in office. Not because they want the guy, but basically because I can wear them down in my browbeating. Utter nonsense. Either your candidate gets the votes or they don't. That's a factor of your candidate. Nobody else's responsibility. People vote for all sorts of reasons with all sorts of priorities in mind. And in pursuit of that voting, it's not right or wrong. It's just more or less disadvantageous to you. I want to go into Joe Biden's savaging by Trump. And I also want to explain why I believe that Sanders injured Joe Biden in this race. And again, not for the typical reasons that you hear, not because he issued some kind of attack or not because he ran against the race of Joe Biden. No, it's a little bit more fundamental reason that he's injured Joe Biden. It wasn't because he tried to injure Joe Biden. It was more so his attempt at lessening harm basically potentially caused more harm. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you for allowing me to do it. Let's go to Trump. And let's watch Trump dig into one Joe Biden. He's not ready. He's not ready. Let's watch.
Given the risk that the flu and the coronavirus come back, there could be a problem. Do you think there is a risk that there will be lack of agreement, lack of legitimacy to the results in a very close election, and people start saying, well, a whole bunch of people couldn't go and vote because they were scared?
I can't tell you what's going to happen in an election. Great question. I can't tell you what's going to happen. We have a sleepy guy in a basement of a house that the press is giving a free pass to, who doesn't want to do debates because of COVID, and lots of things are happening, right? And I watched a couple of interviews, and I say, I look forward to this, but they're keeping him sheltered because of the coronavirus, and he's not moving around. He's not moving too much. And then I watch what the press does to the Republican Party, and to me in particular. We had the greatest economy ever put together. We were doing, this is a month and a half ago, we were doing numbers likes of which we've never done. African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, best employment numbers ever in the history of our country. Our employment numbers, the best in the history of our country, almost 160 million people. The stock market, record numbers, many, many times during my tenure. Many, many times. But now we have a country that we had to close because of this. And frankly, if we didn't close it, we would have lost millions of people possibly, but certainly we would have lost 1 million people. You take the high number and cut it in.
Now, Trump, if you notice, went into attacking Biden, drop of a hat. Didn't think twice about it. There's a sleepy guy in a basement that the media is giving a free pass to. They don't treat Republicans that way. Now, does Trump have a point? Yes, of course Trump has a point. They don't bring up the rape charge, meaning the allegation. The cops are apparently investigating that charge. And yeah, mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, don't bring it up, despite having Joe Biden on air to have those conversations. They just skirt around it. They did ask Bernie Sanders, they did ask AOC, but the person who you would typically ask is the person at the center of the allegation. So there's that. They didn't call him out on just flagrant lies where he got caught for in the other campaigns, meaning Joe Biden lying about civil rights. Joe Biden got busted for that. The mainstream media had to know that Joe Biden got busted for that, but at no point did mainstream media bring it up. Beyond mainstream media not bringing it up, Sanders was not using opposition research, and so the people who would have seeded that into the media, Sanders forbade from doing that. Yeah, good times. So yeah, Sanders forbade from doing that. Also, Trump making that point that, look, I saw a few of those meetings, I saw a few of those interviews, and he was licking his lips regarding Joe Biden. Now again, you've seen all of these clips from Joe Biden for yourself, and they're embarrassing. Like the idea that this guy is running for president of anything is shocking. You would not leave Joe Biden alone with a book of matches. And yet, the Democratic Party has decided that this is the person to beat Trump. This is the person who's empathetic and all of these other great qualities that is going to go up against Trump. Joe Biden is a flagrant liar and lied tremendously in that race. And the media at no point made a big issue out of it. It's utterly astonishing. So you can't necessarily say Trump is entirely wrong on this front. Also, when the media or when the public looks at these two, the public basically breaks even, especially in swing states, in regards to which one they defer to on the various issues of like coronavirus, economy, etc., etc. It's extremely bizarre. But catch is, Trump does have a point that Joe Biden has not been favoring or faring all that well in the interviews. And if you saw Joe Biden in an interview, would you be licking your lips if you were going to get him on a debate stage? Yeah, I think so. I mean, Trump is unrestrained in the way that he could go after Joe Biden. He's not restrained by hypocrisy. He's not restrained by, oh, that's too tough or that's too harsh. None of those are hedges from the standpoint of Trump. Trump will bring up the rape charge. Trump will bring up Joe Biden lying about civil rights. Trump will bring up lying about South Africa. Trump will bring up the black folks can't take care of the kids. That Joe Biden was having the crime bill putting blacks in prison while he was trying to let them out. He would bring up all that stuff, saying Joe Biden was talking about cutting Social Security and lied about it. Joe Biden was talking about the Iraq War and lied about it. Joe Biden was pushing for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the NAFTA. All of that stuff is going to become points of contention. Hunter Biden is going to be the Hillary emails of 2020. The grifting family members of Joe Biden, all of that is going to come up for conversation and come up for scrutiny in this 2020 primary when we get to the main election. Take a look at this, just so you can see where Trump is coming from when he saw these interviews with Joe Biden and he thought to himself, oh man, I can't wait to get this guy on the debate stage.
Has actually increased of the president's sort of job response. You've been criticizing President Trump for his response, sort of the slowness of the response for weeks now, but a few recent polls suggest that public approval has actually increased of the president's sort of job performance. And I wonder why you think the public doesn't see his leadership the same way as you do.
Well, I'm not suggesting what the public sees about his leadership. Let me take the last question first. What I'm suggesting is that I know what has to be done in the following, that faster is better than slower. There's things we need now.
Just so we're clear, I'm playing this particular video because he's talking about the coronavirus. And so he's trying to give a coherent statement about the coronavirus. Now, Trump is doing his presidenting thing, so Joe Biden needs to be able to be strong, needs to be clear, needs to be coherent, and he needs to be able to have this comparison as opposing viewpoint of whatever Donald Trump is doing. His inability to do that will be to his own detriment, especially if Donald Trump is screwing up and getting a lot of people killed, but Joe Biden can't necessarily create a contrast that the public could actually see as less than negligible. Arguing that faster is better than slower, no shit, Sherlock. Like, that's what I mean. Like, these briefings have been utterly pointless. It's been devoid of content, devoid of actually any real material benefit for the population per se. It's more like talking bits and sound bites. These have not necessarily been, as Sanders have been giving, these kind of just policy-oriented, coherent conversations of what we need to do in order to assist the working class of this nation. Joe Biden has not been able to articulate that. Let's hear the last part, because he gets fact-checked, and then not being able to speak extemporaneously goes into just weirdness.
Now, not tomorrow, not yesterday, but months ago or a month ago, and the president's not acting. Now, I don't care whether the president's numbers are going up and down. And yes, and I noticed that the president's numbers of the public have gone up in handling this crisis, but they haven't gone up in terms of his presidency.
Gallup did show he is now at 49% job approval, which is a reversal from a few weeks ago. So it's just an interesting development. It does suggest that the American people see him as a stronger leader than you've been maybe characterizing him.
Well, I hope that he does. He's so strong that he's up way above that, because we need the help now. We need help now.
I have no idea what that meant. He gets fact-checked, and then all of a sudden we need the help now. Now, the catch is Donald Trump's numbers have actually started to degrade a bit. So, like I said, this was about a month ago, and at this point, the public has started to blame him a little bit more for either the high death toll or the high infection rate. Now, Sanders has hurt Joe Biden two ways. Has nothing to do with him being in the race. Has nothing to do with the tax that he's leveled at Joe Biden. Now, understand that when Democrats push incrementalism, they basically are taking a lot of money from donors. Those donors can either use that money for them or against them. Oftentimes, there may be corporations or lobbyist positions that they want to have access to after they get out of Congress. And so they're incentivized to take certain policies that are incremental, that basically we're going to be least worse. And in taking these incremental policies to not go farther than basically the wealth of the nation will be injured by. Meaning, don't go too far. You don't want to go so far where you adversely affect people who are basically giving you that money or having that position available for you to take after you finish your stint in Congress. This, despite getting money, depresses the vote. Meaning the main constituency that Democrats basically rely on, people of color, poor. At this point, you have this kind of professional class right now. But basically, when we're talking about people of color, well, that's the constituency that often doesn't vote and disproportionately doesn't vote. And the reason they often don't vote is because they feel dejected from the process. They don't see how their engagement in the political process is paying real dividends in real material ways. And so it's like, why am I going to participate in this process if I'm not getting anything out of this process? These people give all of these good words. They give these good words every 4 years. But at the end of the day, nothing fundamentally changes. I am still struggling in the position to which I found myself, in which they pull out. Now, by not holding the Democratic Party accountable, we effectively allowed this process to take place. Because if you held them to a certain standard, then at the very least, when the public is looking at and evaluating, well, that standard, let's say that standard was Medicare for all, or let's say that standard was paying off college debt, well, you're going to get a contingent of Sanders supporters, you may get a contingent of independents and other people who are for these particular policies. Even if you don't get Sanders' entire platform, you're able to peel away and get people interested in the campaign because you're giving real material benefits, as opposed to running with a moderate position where you lose that enthusiasm. Joe Biden is running with 24% enthusiasm. Look, primaries, by definition, are supposed to be competitive processes. Because primaries are supposed to be competitive processes, the incentive basically is for people who are in that primary is to want to win. And because those people want to win, they pull out all the stops, which means they have every incentive in the world to put out hit points on things that are vulnerable in the other campaigns or things that they believe they can exploit. In putting out these hit points, several things takes place, but basically you inoculate your opponent, meaning either this is not sufficient in order to win, in which case the audience and the public gets normalized to just this information being out in the public, so it loses its political effectiveness in regards to tearing down the campaign, or it overwhelms the campaign. Meaning when Joe Biden was lying about civil rights and he had to drop out the campaign, well, that overwhelmed his campaign. There was no way he could recover from it. Meaning by putting out attacks and by going after the candidate, you effectively figure out what is a monumental challenge that the candidate can't overcome, or whether or not this is not necessarily an attack that has legs anyway, in which case, again, you inoculate the candidate against those attacks. By Sanders not going after Joe Biden in this, Sanders basically gave him a free pass. The way Trump was going after Joe Biden, every level of attack is fair game. But Sanders not using opposition research, not going after Biden on these various items, basically let Biden off the hook without actually being challenged. Meaning Biden is going into the general election as a blank slate. Meaning the media, yes, is protecting Joe Biden, but Trump is going to be hitting him on all sorts of fronts. And you have no idea whether or not Joe Biden is walking around with a glass jaw, because that was never challenged in the primary itself. That is greatly problematic. That is extremely problematic. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Without you having any general idea on whether or not Biden can sustain damage from those attacks, or whether or not Biden is even up to the challenge of having those debates and whatnot. Without knowing that, you're going into the primary or to the general election blind. I'm saying that does a disservice to one Joe Biden. Say for the moment you landed on a planet that was full of people who are under subjugation by a dictator, and you use your your technology in order to liberate the people. And then immediately after you liberate the people, it goes into a civil war. And a quarter of the population of the planet ends up dying in a hellish death. Now, your response to this is, well, getting rid of the dictator, I was trying to give these people liberation. But the catch is, just because you do something that you believe is personally good doesn't necessarily mean the results are going to be good. Your actions, for all of the best intentions, may be irrational in order to get you the objective that you're trying to accomplish. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. And Sanders want to not necessarily go after Joe Biden, and Sanders want to not put out opposition research. He actually crippled Joe Biden going into the election because Joe Biden has no idea what those attacks are going to be leveled at him are going to do, meaning their political effect. But also, he in no way was ever inoculated from any of the attacks that Donald Trump is going to aim at him, meaning all the attacks are basically going to be new going into the general election. The last point here is that if Sanders wanted to actually get Joe Biden over the finish line, the way to do it would have been to hold Joe Biden accountable to a certain standard, meaning I'm going to hold you to Medicare for all in order to get my support or the support from my supporters, or I'm going to hold you to paying off student debt. And to make the argument that I don't think you can win this race without appropriating these policies, which is why I'm standing by these policies. You prevent a race to the bottom, and in preventing a race to the bottom, you give the opportunity for more people to come on board for Biden and to increase the enthusiasm associated with the campaign. Like, share, subscribe.